Congratulations again to Deputy O'Leary on the new arrival to the family. So if I might just welcome the witnesses that are here with us today. I know Ms Donegan and Ms Dolan and Ms Ostick, and congratulations again, Claire, on your on President of the USI. Great achievement. I suppose I approached this having worked as a contract researcher on a research award at third level. And I suppose I also have experience from having worked in funding agencies as well. So I suppose I have a little bit of knowledge of what it's like to be a contract researcher at third level. I suppose some of the questions I would have is that I suppose I would disagree with your statement, Ms Donegan, in relation to research and funding being linked to industrialisation. I would very much disagree with that. I would see that the research prioritisation that has happened over the last number of years has actually increased the number of PhD students that we have. In fact, the statistics that we have that link back to the CSO show that we've actually increased by 100% since 2011 the number of PhDs that we have at third level. They're up to 30,000 now, which back in 2006, I believe, it was around 11,000 PhD students. So it just shows that there's been an incredible investment, government investment in third level, I think, to encourage excellence in all of our universities and our institutes of technology that are now making that transformational leap to technological university status. I suppose I would point to as well over 1 billion in Horizon Europe funding. That is a milestone for Ireland in terms of the funding that's been achieved by our researchers on the ground. These are research teams that have done incredible things. We're over just Retour. So I believe that what we've achieved in third level and on behalf of the researchers and the research teams in Ireland is absolutely incredible. It shows that we're internationally competitive. The areas that we're funding are areas of societal challenge. Societal challenge is what we're looking at. We're looking at the environment, energy. We're looking at food production systems. We're looking at robotics and AI. We're looking at independent living. We're looking at an aging population. These are the areas that we fund. These are the areas that we're funding. These are what our researchers are doing. So I really do disagree with that statement. I suppose the areas that I would like to really point to as well is that we're here, I suppose, to review the legislative scrutiny of the general scheme of the HEA bill. And I would feel that, as you've mentioned in your opening statement, Ms Donegan, there are a lot of areas in terms of the precarious nature for researchers. I suppose I would feel that there is an awful lot that has to be done here. But the number of PhDs that are graduating and coming out of our universities are finding employment in other areas outside of our academic fields. So in other words, an awful lot of our graduates are moving into industry. And in fact, one of the key drivers for innovation that we've seen, and especially in the West, I suppose, in the areas that we see with medtech and engineering and links between healthcare and engineering and multidisciplinary research, is that it's really driving sort of that holy trinity of universities being embedded in societies and communities that they come from and responding to what we need. I suppose I would point to one example myself that I'm aware of, even in the last year, that SFI had funding for COVID-related research, and that funding that went to each and every, I think, university in IoT allowed researchers to focus on an immediate impact to a crisis that we're facing this year. So I suppose there are certain things there that I would take on board, and I suppose I might just ask you about how we can work towards supporting, I suppose, researchers in terms of the contracts, because I do understand that, be it masters, PhD students or postdocs, it is about excellence, and it is about trying to ensure that we can ensure that people graduate to whatever levels that they can, and then that also will have a career in areas that can be outside of third level. I suppose if I might ask Ms Ostick, as for USI on the students, it's very much about the student experience, and I think that's the heart of the bill that Minister Harris has brought before us. I suppose if I could speak to you just on some of the points, if I was saying to you about the student experience, what would be one or two things that you would pull out of the bill that you have in front of you now? And I might just leave it at that for the time being, and I might come back to Ms Dolan if I have time. Thank you.
Firstly, just in terms of the engagement with students, I cannot reiterate enough how important it is And this can be done through the National Student Engagement Programme, I specifically reference on Ed 43, but also the Student Forum. But the one concern that we have here is that the operational detail for this is still missing. So the Student Forum has huge potential in terms of engaging with students and looking at the direction of education going forward and how we can support students and enhance the overall student experience for students, particularly as well with the student survey. This is something we're in partnership with the PQI, USI and the HA as well, which annually reviews the student experience, the academic side of things. But as we always mention, the student experience is far greater than just the academic side. So it's all about being able to engage the learning that often takes place outside of the classroom, but being able to respond to different things emerging throughout the year, by ensuring that the student voice is at the centre, at the top tables, and that, I suppose, as issues emerge, that can be addressed immediately and over time as well, to ensure that going forward, it's a better enhanced student experience for everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Claire. If I might ask Ms Donegan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm going to come back and say that I fundamentally disagree with you. Obviously, the numbers of PhD students coming through correlates with the number of students that are actually coming into our universities. Back in 2008, we had 150,000. That went up to 213 in 2020, and we expect 240 to 250,000 students to come into our universities in 2030. And that is something that we should be very much mindful of, because of the funding crisis before COVID and COVID on top of that. That absolutely is stretching resources within the universities. But the numbers of PhD students are coming through. You're quite right, and our own academics are, have worked really hard through the COVID situation, through that financial crisis, to support those students. With regard to the, you talked about Meditech and you talked about COVID itself, the research that was done in a very short period of time. I think Professor Luke O'Neill would tell you himself, and he was at our own conference, that only because of COVID, that funding would not have been given to the universities to study those particular infections. And because it was an economic and a very important issue that had to be addressed worldwide, the absolute support and I suppose importance of researchers working on that issue, funding was available. But when we look at academics that are in humanities, social sciences and arts, they would say to you that that's not the situation for them. So and the reason why universities are reaching out to other companies to support them in research is because the funding situations in our universities right now is in a crisis. And it's not sustainable going into the future. And universities cannot survive or depend on or are sustainable on the core funding that they are receiving from the government. So if I was to pick any issue out of all of the issues that have been raised in our submission, it has to be around funding, and it has to be around sustainability of universities and third level education into the future. And we can't do that in a real sustainable way unless we have proper funding. And that impacts on everything that we do. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Donegan. I would agree that there is a challenge with, I suppose, the core funding, but the research funding that comes into universities, I suppose, is separate. That's the competitive external funding that I suppose is achieved through national and international exchequer funding. But yeah, I would take your points on board. Can I just